Okay.
Can I just really quickly? I think that March 15th is the International Day Against Police Brutality, and there's big events that happen all around the world, and especially in Montreal. So you might want to look at that day.
That's a great point. Okay, because there's a few other proposals we need to get to. From Paul, you said a few things. I think you get them all written down. There's the treasurer, the budget or whatever.
Yeah, I feel it's important, again, to put the horse before the carriage, is we need to assign a treasurer and hopefully open up a credit union bank account. There is already money available to start this, so.
Okay. I'm just going to make a list of what's remaining. Is there any other proposals that need to get on the agenda?
Long I have spoken on the greater effectiveness of having a physical location for Occupy Peterborough. I would like to propose that I will form a committee, even if it is a committee of one, to engage finding a location and an economic model to support that location. Any and all can support me if there is some form of support within the group.
What are we doing with this location?
I'm just making the list quick. Is there any other proposals that need to be talked about today? Okay. So the treasurer budget piece, there is a budget type committee, which has been nominated to be myself and somebody else. So we need more people on this, and because it's not a committee that actually does anything or make proposals or anything, but it's just been, I've been nominated to hold the donations.
Has there been a formal, I might have missed the GA, has there been a formal proposal to create a finance committee yet?
GA2, yeah.
Okay.
So there was a proposal to create a committee to work, talk about fund, it was called fundraising, actually, the first GA. And then
Well, that's the thing, fundraising and finance are not the same
Exactly.
thing.
So that's interesting because, okay, so I've been nominated to hold this money, and so I have it in a box in my room. And so I guess I'd like to propose a budget committee that will talk about fundraising and finance and whatnot. Or no, it'd just be to hold on to the donations that we have gotten, and then the GA would tell them when to distribute them, and that's it. Clarification?
If we get a Peterborough Community Credit Union account, the way that they work is automatically that you need 2 signers.
Yeah.
I'd really like to suggest that that's a good thing, that we automatically make sure that every time there's 2 people that we've all decided we trust are on board.
Yeah.
It just makes accountability easier for the people who are holding that account beyond all else, you know?
Yeah. And I prefer that instead of the box in my room.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so let's talk about this proposal then. A budget committee to consolidate finance and fundraising and whatnot, for the time being, because nothing's been happening with those. But this committee would pursue a community credit union account and determine how to, and put the money into it, and then through the GA, distribute it as the GA decides. So that's a proposal. Do a temperature check on this. So I didn't see any hands unsure.
Well, we just ask if there's any unsure.
Is there any unsure?
I just want to clarify, we're talking about combining the efforts of a fundraising and a finance committee?
Let's
Because
scrap
I
that.
actually don't feel comfortable with that. I think they are 2 different committees, and that fundraising would work more with outreach.
Let's scrap that for now and just say creation of a budget committee. The budget committee, all it will do is create a bank account with a credit union and distribute money from this, and just operate the bank account and distribute money as the GA decides, using accountability measures such as 2 signers and whatnot. So that's the clarified proposal. And well, before we reduce consensus, any points of information or clarification or discussion? You had your hand up before.
Yes, I will volunteer to be one of the trustees or
I would also like to,
signer, but I'd like to see 3 people, and I'm putting it forward that it's somewhat tentative because I feel like there are some root issues that I may at some point be having difficulty with, and that's why I'm looking for at least 3 people, 2 signers, because I may have to go. I can only go so far with this organization.
Fair enough. Come around.
Given the fact that we are a general assembly and not in a fixed group, we have a consistent issue that's difficult to deal with, which is quorum. If the finance committee is empowered to delineate these monies, I think that it coming to the GA sounds great, but I mean, if a bunch of people come on a week where there's like barely any of us, to me, our finances do need a little bit more checks and balances than just passing willy-nilly through the GA, and if a whole bunch of people who want to like rent a van to go someplace all show up to a meeting, that's what happens, you know?
Fair enough.
So I would modify your proposal maybe, that we create a budget committee to get a credit union account, to get co-signers with it and put the money in right now. But then I would ask that that budget committee come to the GA with a proposal for a checks and balances mechanism for how we will delineate the funds. Will you accept my friendly amendment?
I will. That's very friendly. I appreciate that.
I'll do as well, thank you.
Yeah. So, Menace has been making those points clear, I hope. So then I would like to, if there's no more points of information or clarification on this, creation of a budget committee, which will create a bank account with accountability measures such as 2 signers at least, which will also come back at the next GA with a system of checks and balances for how these funds will be allocated and distributed. Does that sound fair? So then put this out for consensus,
3 signers would be better.
at least. So putting this out for consensus. And we now have a budget committee. All right. So there was also the talk of creating a working group. So it's 3:55. Talk about creating a working group on location. And there was talk, I think somebody had mentioned before about creating like an occupation committee or whatnot, so something about actually planning a space taking exercise for a limited amount of time or whatever the group ends up deciding. Does that sound similar to your proposal? There was talk about creating like a working group which will plan in the future an occupation of a space.
Yeah, I was going to form an encampment committee, but I decided that it's quite complex. So I was just going to start with a small little occupation of something downtown, such as the police station, and once we had more numbers, work on getting an encampment. But anyone's welcome to do anything.
I just got told in my ear that is different. So it's 3:56.
Oh, I was gonna say one more thing. George had something he brought up a long time ago back at a couple of the Occupy movements, and I think he's forgotten about it, occupying Papa's Billiards.
We're coming back to the proposal. So it was on, if I remember correctly, because I think this actually proposal has come up at previous GAs about having almost a shared rental building, which individuals would live there, and this would almost act as almost a space that Occupy Peterborough could be regularly, or be like a space that would be like
Organizational space.
Organizational space. You got a block over there? Got a block. We have clarification information first, and then we'll get to.
Okay.
Is that something? Okay.
First of all, the statement about an occupation camp, would that not be under direct action kind of thing?
Yeah.
And be permanent residents, again, I have to insist that it's against the whole Occupy ideology of occupying a space like every other organization out there. The police, 1% want to hide away somewhere. That we must occupy public space. Just my opinion, sorry.
Come around the circle. Oh, sorry. I saw Michelle's hand up, so.
I just have a question of clarification for the notes. Are we looking at perhaps two different proposals? One is that there's a group of people who want to look at a permanent inside space, and then there's this like proposal for the creation of a committee that's kind of like the site committee?
The site committee wasn't proposed, but that's something I think Ian's gonna talk to direct action about. The
So we're-
proposal at hand, yeah,
Okay,
would be, a permanent inside space.
but is the proposal that we erect a committee to look at this? I'm not word clear on George's proposal.
You did say a working group.
Yes,
Maybe you
I-
are, Cheryl.
Okay. So it would be a working group, sorry.
Speaking to my proposal, yes, I see creating a committee, even a committee of one, to find permanent location largely for organizational space and tactical development and communication development, all of the infrastructure that comes along with a movement. Trying to develop your infrastructure in a very distributed way is a huge logistical challenge. Trying to create a site or an event is a logistical challenge when you don't have an operational point. That's what I'm looking at, is the operational point. The cost of this room is a significant cost on an hourly basis compared to getting carried over a month compared to getting a permanent sort of fixed place. That's what I'm looking at. And as far as the occupied events, which are, you go somewhere, I totally agree. The Occupy events be at various public spaces, various events of significance.
Because of time, and this is an interesting, because you did say a working group, so I'd like to propose that, in fact, a working group can be formed, and that can be discussed, and this can be brought forward as a proposal if the working group wants. And so George and autonomous individuals can collaborate on this if they so please, and bring it back to as a proposal in the future. And I don't think necessarily you need ratification from the GA to talk with other autonomous individuals about this. So I don't necessarily think you need it as a proposal at this point, except for the working group. So a temperature check on a working group on a permanent inside space, which can be brought to Real Flux. Okay. I think we're gonna have to table this. So that is a big discussion.
I was just gonna say, we are technically out of time, and I feel like we could go a lot of different places here, but it's really important that we make sure that we don't lose anything that we were working on. As far as I can tell by the notes, we have looked at most of the proposals that were brought up today. Is that accurate to what you have, Cheryl? Are there any missing proposals?
The only one that seems to have gone by was,
I wanted to propose. I don't know if I can do that.
no, I guess we are.
Yeah, as far as the notes contain, we have addressed each of the things and put it somewhere, whether referred to another place or time or whatever, so.
Okay.
I would invite us to close today's meeting and for people to bring strong proposals to next week's meeting.
All right. Well, okay, there's a lot of things to work on. A lot of people have stuff to write up and work on in committees and groups and autonomous organizations for next week. Thank you all for coming here and being here. We're going to close this General Assembly, but if people want to make announcements and talk amongst yourselves, it's not that cold outside, so love that.
I need to get contact information. People sign their name